Hey, Jeffrey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm assuming we're going to be ready at 2 o'clock, unless you find that we don't have a quorum.
I believe
so-
we have a quorum now, so
Okay.
whenever.
Thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, AT&T
Yeah.
says it's 2 o'clock.
That's what I was thinking. So good afternoon. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of January 27th, 2021. My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Josh Whitehead serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Whitehead, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker.
Here.
Mr. Claybrook.
Here.
Ms. Doss.
Present.
Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Oh, no more misters. Vice Chair Savage Towns. Ms. Skurlock.
Here.
Oh, I found a Mr. Mr. Malazri.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman.
Here.
Okay, that's 7. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests as articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or the Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I would like to swear in staff. So do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
Okay, thank you. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting?
John Jackson, so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
JT, second.
Okay, thank you, JT. Is there any discussion regarding last month's minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the previous meeting's minutes will signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Secretary, please provide us a secretary's report if we have one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and because it's January, we do have a secretary's report. Before I get to that, I did just notice that the YouTube page hyperlinks the agenda for the Land Use Control Board. So if you're a board member, please use the PDF that I sent earlier, and if you're everybody else, go to the Board of Adjustment, that is, homepage. You can Google that by typing in Memphis or Shelby County Board of Adjustment, and there's a link for most recent agenda. That's the agenda we'll be using, and it itself is hyperlinked to all our staff reports and the Secretary's report for last year. Mr. Chairman, this is organized like it has been in previous years. Our first segment is entitled Attendance, and we all had pretty good attendance this year. We did cancel the March meeting because we had not yet established a manner in which to conduct these telephonic meetings, and I think by the time we figured it out, the deadline for notices had already passed. And I will make a note that Ms. Vice Chair is here. Thank you, Mr. Penzis. So our second section talks about our caseload. I want to make one note about this. I list 134 cases. That includes cases that were filed let's see, filed, that does not, okay, so the 2020 number of 134 includes cases filed in December for this meeting. That is a little unusual. We have changed that back and forth over the years, but to make it consistent, we're just going to cover all the inconsistencies of the past. We're just saying if you have a suffix of a certain year, we're going to count you in that year, because we have gone back and forth on that. We've gone fourth this time because Acela, our online permitting software, is now the progenitor of the case numbers, and we use it to allocate case numbers. So you can't give a January year case number if something is filed in December. It's way too wonky, but I did want to make that note. And we're about to hit our 14,000th request this year, if for those people who are interested in the history. The next section talks about some of our more significant cases. The benefit of the first one, I guess, is if you're heard in January, as the Valvoline on Union was, you have the benefit of actually getting a photograph in the annual report because you might actually be under construction, whereas the rest of these from subsequent months obviously have not yet, well, some are rejected, but those that were approved have not yet gotten to the construction phase. Section number 4 deals with staff. I did want to make a note that Ms. Shoup Diggs, who you may recall from last year, she was hired to fill the vacancy, permanent vacancy, with Ms. Summer Smith's departure. Ms. Shoup Diggs was previously an intern, and now she's a full-fledged member of the team. In addition, we brought back the two-tiered planning position where you have the more senior planners designated as principal planners, and Mr. Bacchus and Mr. Penzis are now our two principal planners. Finally, this is a discussion that has been had since I think the board's founding almost 100 years ago, and that deals with use variance. When does a use variance become an improper rezoning? And what I've done here in this last section is try to provide the body the two guardrails that have been issued by the courts. If for those of you interested and for those of you who already know, Ambler v. Euclid, the famous Supreme Court case, United States Supreme Court case that allowed zoning, municipal zoning, had a guardrail, and it was issued by the court a couple years later in the city of Cambridge, where the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, had gone too far with their zoning. They had rezoned a piece of property that was surrounded by a Ford motor plant, an Ivory soap plant, and various railroads as single-family residential, and the court said, when you remove all beneficial uses of a property, that's where we're going to say you have crossed the allowable threshold that we would defer to legislative bodies with their zoning code. Well, the same is true with our use variance cases. Of course, we're talking about Tennessee and not the United States Supreme Court. But back in 1964, one of those guardrails was established with the, some people say renowned, some others say infamous, Reddick v. Smith decision that dealt with a Texaco, now it's an Amoco. They're at the corner of Poplar and June. And in that decision, the Supreme Court used some terms that seem surprising, even to me, who's read it several times, that the Board of Adjustment was given wide and liberal discretion to rezone. They used that word, rezone properties, so long as there was evidence of practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship. Well, as you can imagine, after that was issued in 64, it set a frenzy of use variance cases. Well, the courts intervened just a few years later in 1972, again with the gas station. This time it was at the corner of Summer and Graham. And in that instance, the court found that actually the evidence on the record did not show any unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty because I guess the most damning evidence provided in that hearing was that the apartments that were there at the time and still lie on that property were enjoyed a high level of occupancy. So there's our two guardrails. It's all about the evidence presented by the applicant and on the record on whether there's a practical difficulty or undue hardship. Interestingly enough, the fathers, and they were mostly men, the fathers of zoning back in the 20s and to some degree the 30s did not really provide us much guidance on what in the heck the difference is between a practical difficulty and a hardship. Many states, mostly state Supreme Courts, but in some regards, state legislatures have tried to make a difference between what seems like a lower threshold, practical difficulty, and what seems to be a higher threshold, a undue hardship. And they have stated that bulk variances need to show a finding of practical difficulty, whereas use variances have to show that more difficult undue hardship test. I have just written and been published in an American Planning Association article. There's a hyperlink on that last page of our Secretary's report. I have a few interesting maps that kind of lay out which states are which, and maybe not surprisingly, the states that had more of a built environment when zoning came online 100 years ago tend to be more pro-use variance, and then states as you travel westward and you find that your cities weren't really as built up and advanced, those places tend to be more prohibitive with use variances. So just an interesting concept that I think maybe the people on this phone are the very part of a very small group of people who would care either way about that topic. So, Mr. Chairman, let's talk about procedure. I will introduce each case that is listed on the agenda. Copies of those are again on our homepage, the Board of Adjustments homepage. For each case that we hear, staff will give a presentation. We will first hear from the applicant, then followed by those in support of the applicant, and finally by those in opposition. After those sets of time, which are 10 minutes apiece, we will go back to the applicant for a 2-minute rebuttal. I would advise the body to ask questions of the speakers while they still have the floor, but there is a second opportunity to ask any speaker of any questions that you may have, but do it before the closing of the public hearing, because after the close of the public hearing, we need a 2/3 vote to reopen it, and then we, under our rules, have to hear both sides an equal amount of time. All motions by the board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members, regardless of those number of members present. The board can also vote to hold an application for up to 90 days. All section numbers that we refer to this afternoon come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and the County Commission in 2010 and became effective on January 1, 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. This body is vested with the power to act on these variance cases under Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled under the code.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and congratulations on your publication. We'll look for you very soon on the New York Times bestsellers. I think they have a new zoning section there that probably is going to be getting a lot of press sometime soon, but we'll definitely take a look. Thank you for sharing that with us. At this point, the board will establish a consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he he or she should do so. So really on this, everybody that's going to object should have already filed in, but if any member of the board or any member of the staff would like to hear a case, they need to say so as Mr. Secretary calls out that case. Once we've established that a consent agenda, the board will vote on all cases placed on consent as a whole, will not hold individual public hearings on those cases. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible to be placed on consent today?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with item number 1, which is a resolution of the Board of Adjustment that continuation of meeting telephonically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Memphis and Shelby County in light of the COVID-19 outbreak pursuant to Section A1 of Governor Lee's Executive Order number 71. And that executive order takes us to March 1st, by the way. We will hear number 2, so following on the consent calendar, we'll go to number 3. Agenda item number 3 is docket BOA 20-126, City, located at 331 St. Nick. The applicant is Landon Himmelwright. The use district is the R10 Single Family District, and the request is a variance pursuant to subsection 329F to allow an encroachment into a platted front yard setback. Agenda item number 4 is docket BOA 20-128, located at 3925 Wales. The applicant is the Shelby County School Board, represented by Jim Williams of Williams Sign Company. The use district is the R6 and the CMU3 residential and commercial districts, with the request being a variance from sub-item 429E2G3 and sub-item 496E2H5 to permit a sign that uses video messaging within 100 feet of a residential use. Agenda item number 5, which is docket BOA 129, correspondence to docket BOA 2114 at the southwest corner of Poplar and Humes. The applicant is Gill Property Humes General Partnership, represented by Brown, Gill, and Taylor Webb. The use districts are the RU3 residential and CMU3 commercial districts. And again, the request is a modification to docket BOA 2114 to allow additional retail sales and services in that southern portion of the site. Agenda item number 6 is docket BOA 2130, located at 2197 Central. The applicant is Bart Thomas, represented by Corey Brady. The use district is EMP Employment, and the request is a use variance from Section 847 to allow townhouses, and furthermore, as the staff report indicates, 310-2B to allow lots less than those permitted in the EMP district. Item number 7, which is docket BOA 2131, that's located at 2166 LZ. The applicant is Bird's Nest, LLC, with the use district being the R6 residential single family within the Cooper Young Historic Overlay. The request is a variance from subsection 444B to allow 2 curb cuts on a residential lot without a circular drive. Number 8, docket BOA 2132. Located at 1076 Bruce Street, the applicant is KHD Investments Group, LLC. The use district is the R6 residential single family, again within the Cooper Young Historic Overlay, with the request being a variance from Section 361 to allow a side street yard setback of 5 feet rather than 10 feet. Number 9, docket BOA 2133 at 600 Goodwin. That's on the north side of Southern Avenue at Terrell Place. The applicant is the Memphis Country Club, represented by Michael Babb. The use district is the RU1 multifamily district, and the request is a use variance from Section 252 to allow indoor recreational uses. Agenda item number 10 is docket BOA 2134 at 2764 Lamar. The applicant is All About Us, represented by Delner Smith and Cleo Davis. The use district is the CMU1 commercial district, and the request is a use variance from 252 to allow the expansion of a funeral home. And finally, item 11 is docket BOA 2105, located at 5305 Mesquite. The applicant is Daryl DeRosia, represented by Clark Davis. The use district is the R6 single family district, and the variance is from Section 361A to allow an encroachment into a side yard setback.
Okay, thank you very much. May I have a motion to to approve the consent agenda, which was established by the secretary, which is basically all items except number 2. So that's item 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bacchus, thank you. Good afternoon to you. I just wanted to, we need to pull item number 7.
Okay.
There is some clarification on the conditions. The applicant wants some clarification on the conditions.
Okay. Very good. Are there any other items we need to pull?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So then hearing none, we're looking for a motion then to approve items 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
John Jackson, so move.
Okay, it's moved. Is there a second?
Vice Chair, second. Vice Chair,
Okay.
second.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. At this point, I'm going to remind the board by voting on the consent agenda, he or she affirms that he or she has read the staff report and is in full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker,
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Malazri,
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the property in the vicinity.
Ms. Scurlock,
Yes.
and Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
We have 8 ayes.
All right, thank you very much. So if you are on the call for any of those items, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, or 11, you've been approved as conditioned by staff. We appreciate you working with us today. Mr. Secretary, will you call the first case on the regular agenda?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Agenda item number 2 is docket BOA 2103, located at 1189 Snowden. The applicants are Kenneth L. and Terry L. Jones. The use district is the CMU3 district within a historic overlay, and the request is a variance from subsection 467C and paragraph 467E4 to allow a temporary black vinyl coated chain link fence 6 feet in height in front of a single-family home.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Bacchus, would you care to give us a brief staff report on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to you and all the members of the board. Brian Bacchus with the Division of Planning and Development. This application is before us to allow a black vinyl coated chain link fence in the front yard of a single-family home in the Speedway Terrace Historic District. Location is 1189 Snowden Avenue. Next slide, next slide, please. Thank you. The property is currently in the commercial mixed-use district that is in the commercial mixed-use district. This is a view of the home, a principal structure located on one lot, which is 1189 Snowden. This is a June 19th Google view of a 2-story, well, actually 2.5-story, 4-square home with a full-width front porch, stone structure of historic integrity. Next slide, Ms. Athena, please. Thank you. The zoning I stated earlier, as you can see on our screen, the subject properties, it's one lot, which is the blue dot, that's the single-family home, existing home. The adjacent lot where you see a vehicle parked in the drive, that's a separate lot. This application is actually for 1189 and 1191. As you can see in the zoning map, the zoning line is on the eastern boundary of 1191. The current graphic and the current zoning district map, it needs to be updated to correct the CMU Historic District zoning just for those 2 properties. And we're working on that in-house. So, but as you can see, the zoning is, this house is located south side of Snowden, east of North Bellevue, Major Road, Jackson Avenue, and also Interstate 240 is to your west right away. This single-family home is open to all elements in a single-family neighborhood in the Speedway Terrace Historic District. Next slide, please. The graphic, on the screen will show you, approximate location of the single-family home on one lot, 1189. It also shows, reveals or illustrates existing gates and existing fencing, that is currently on the site. The applicant is proposing to, maintain the current fence in its present condition, for a period of 2 years to allow an opportunity to go forward with a more appropriate residential style fence of black metal tubing. In our next slide, please, for typical front and side yards. Keep in mind, this application has to go to landmarks, and there are certain provisions in their guidelines that allow for certain types of fencing in a historic district. This is a typical front and side yard fence with black metal posts and fencing that is typical throughout all our historic districts. The next slide will reveal to you how open this single-family home is to the elements of the East Parkway, the Jackson Avenue and Interstate 40 right-of-ways. This property is at the northwest edge of a historic district. However, it still has its historic character and integrity, located at this southeast corner. If you note on this slide, you have a commercial building in the CMU district. It's a vehicle service, the old Don's transmission service. It has existing fencing, approximately 7 feet in height, chain link fencing. The subject property, as you notice, is a single-family home. It is the adjacent home that has black coated chain link fencing around it. The applicant has stated to us, as stated earlier, to allow her an opportunity to keep the fence in its current condition for a period of 2 years. Next slide. In the conclusions, we've reviewed the application in accordance with the use variances and zoning code. The next slide gives you conclusions, and I'll just go to the practical difficulty of the zoning code for a single-family home with a chain link fence in the front yard. The extraordinary, exceptional situation found to apply. The property is being located in a high-intensive commercial district adjacent to a major interstate transportation system. It places a historic home in an exceptional situation that meets the certain findings of fact. Therefore, the variance to allow the fence is warranted. Because the lot exhibits an exceptional condition found to apply for fencing in the rear yard that predates the zoning ordinance. There is a current chain link fence in the rear yard that predates the 2010 zoning ordinance. That fence is legal non-conforming. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are recommending, next slide, that the findings of fact have been met, and it meets the extraordinary and exceptional situations on the next slide found to apply to the property, being located in a commercial zoning district adjacent to a major interstate highway system. So we're recommending approval, and the conditions address the statements I made in that presentation, and it also allows the applicant an opportunity to maintain the fence in its current condition, and in 2 years' time to install the appropriate fence, subject to staff review and also the Memphis Landmarks Commission review and approval. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did have several letters in opposition to this request. I'll let the applicant and the opposition explain their position on that. I will not go into that, but that's all I have at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board.
Mr. Bacchus, I have a quick question on condition number 2, just so we're asking them to change the fence a little bit in the meantime there. Is that right, to add the black post? Is that what that's saying, until the 2 years is up?
No, the fence to remain in its current condition or its current state until the 2 years is up.
Okay, so maybe I'm reading it. Until such time has expired, black metal post and fencing to include matching gates shall be installed to replace chain link fence. So I guess, is that prior to the expiration of the 2 years? Is that what that really is? Then
after the expiration.
Okay.
After the expiration.
Okay. All right. We'll make that just light change. Are there any other questions for Mr. Bacchus?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mary Baker, I have a question for Mr. Bacchus.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Mr. Bacchus, how far is the setback between this home and the back of the sidewalk, which I assume is the right-of-way line? Is that 50 feet?
It's probably somewhere between 45 and 50. I would say the
Okay.
front porch is approximately 40 feet. That's eyeballing it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, are there any other questions of staff? All right, hearing none, we're gonna move on to the applicant. Is the applicant on the phone where he can speak with us? Or
Yes,
she?
sir, I am.
Okay, how are you doing? If you will do me a favor and state your name and your address for the record, we'll swear you in, okay?
Okay. Terry Jones, 1189 Snowden, 38107.
Okay, Ms. Jones, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I will.
Okay, go ahead and share with us.
Okay, we purchased this house in 1977. It's very, very sentimental to us, and we've done everything in our power to enhance the community. Our family has been there for so long. We've had family reunions, births, you name it. And from day one, we've had a little trouble, like with some break-ins and certain things. But to try to enhance the property and to preserve it, we've done a lot of changes to, enhance the property as well as the community. So we're just asking that we can get this extra time. My husband is a retired soldier, and we only have that one income. So we just need a little extra time to try to get it all together like it's supposed to be done.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Jones?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
Mary
ma'am.
Baker. I have a question. Ms. Jones?
Yes, ma'am.
Is your family living in this home? It says on this graphic, it says vacant home. Or is that not right?
No, it's not right. We had family members living there. They just recently moved, and someone else is getting ready to move in within the family.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time for Ms. Jones? Okay.
This
Ms.
is
Jones,
Vice
what we're gonna
Chair.
do- Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Vice Chair.
Quick question. The 2-year condition or the 2-year requirement, is that going to be sufficient time to get the chain link fence transferred over to the required fence?
Yes, ma'am, it should be.
Okay.
We've been pricing it and trying to work it out in our budget and, to save up for it. And we've gotten some good suggestions from you guys, and I really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, hearing none, Ms. Jones, what we're gonna do is you talked to us for about just a minute and a half. So we're gonna reserve some time for you if you already have rebuttal time, we'll have some more if you need it, and we're gonna move on to the opposition unless you have somebody else there to speak in favor of this application. So, Mr. Pentis, is the opposition on the line? Go ahead, sorry. Is the opposition on the line with us, Mr. Pentis?
Yes, Justin Gillis.
All right, Mr. Gillis, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you give your name, just go ahead and state your name and address for the record?
Yes, sir. My name is Justin Gillis, 1276 Faxon Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee, 38104.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, if you want to go ahead and share with us.
Yes, sir. The neighborhood opposes this fence because it does not fall within the UDC standard for setback. Throughout Shelby County and Memphis, Tennessee, chain link fences up to the sidewalk have been banned per UDC. This fence was installed March of last year around all 3 of the lots there. And if you look at the picture that Mr. Bacchus provided from Google, you can see there was no fence, pre-existing fence in the rear. So they came in and installed a silver chain link fence, painted silver, around all 3 of these properties. The day that they started work, we had multiple neighbors that apparently went by and talked to the crews that were doing the install to ask if they had permits. And then we notified code enforcement. Code enforcement has been out to the property multiple times to check the site. They were first informed that it was for temporary construction, but that was not the case. Since then, they have issued multiple citations, and Judge Dandridge has opened a case number 205-00778, State of Tennessee versus Terry Jones, for failure to respond to environmental tickets. And that case is still open. Failure to obtain required permits under statute 248-104 county ordinance. That case was initiated in July 8th of 2020. Not only does this not meet UDC, it also doesn't meet the historic overlay guidelines. While we don't directly address fence setbacks in the guidelines, we count on UDC to manage that. We do have requirements regarding materials. A black painted, and keep in mind, this isn't a vinyl covered fence. This is a painted fence. It was originally silver, and they came behind and painted part of it black on the front and on the eastern side after complaints from the neighborhood. Does not meet the historic overlay guidelines for Speedway Terrace, nor does it meet UDC standards for the city of Memphis. This is the gateway to our community. This is the basically the northwest entrance to our neighborhood, and we've recently been facing cases repeatedly where standards are ignored, changes are made, and then we're basically told that, they basically come behind and ask for forgiveness, and it's gotten to be painful. So we're looking for your help, and we're looking for your support. We've worked really hard in this community. I myself have been here over 20 years to help make improvements and make it a livable family space. And I understand Ms. Jones's concerns with crime, but we can't ignore the law. And the differences between black painted or vinyl, which it is not vinyl coated, really shouldn't matter when the setbacks are violated. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gillis. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Gillis at this time?
This is Vice Chair Savage Towns. I do have a question. The opposition, and I'm sorry, Mr. Gillis, I'm sorry. You stated that you all called in code enforcement for the Joneses, but it looks like there's also a chain link fence for the property, the commercial vehicle, looks like it's closed down. Was there any sightings on that property as well?
Yes, ma'am, there was, and they're all owned by the same party. The fences were all installed at the same time for all 3 lots.
Okay.
So, this is.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to ask, was there fencing as well on the other, at the neighbor? And I see it coming from the corner was a neighbor in the White House that's adjacent to the Jones home. Does that one have I can't tell from that picture. Does that one have a link fence too?
No, ma'am. That property has no fence at all. It's the first 3 lots here on Snowden that were fenced in March. They were all fenced in the same week by the same people.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the opposition? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Gillis. Mr. Pensis, was that our only opposition to call in today?
Yes.
Okay. With that, then we're going to move back to the applicant, and we have about 13 minutes left over if we need that long to rebut. So is the applicant back with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Would you like to rebut anything that Mr. Gillis said?
Yes, sir, I would.
Okay.
In the over 40 years that we've been there in that property, we've never had any neighbor to give us any complaints. Never, never. We've only had compliments on the property because of the way we try to keep it up. No one came by to say anything. My husband was there the day that the fence was put up, and he does have a permit. He got a permit for the fence, and we haven't had any complaints until now. Never in the over 40 years that we've been there, because we've only tried to enhance the community as well as our property. And we haven't gotten any letters until around September, because once we put the fence up, it was the mail had to be transferred, to a different area because the mailman couldn't get in there. So we're not understanding about people coming by. Now, we have seen people sitting out in front of the house in cars, different men, but they have not said anything to us, and it's really kind of disturbing to have that to happen so often.
Okay, anything else?
But we're only trying to comply with what you guys are asking us to do. We want to comply. We're not trying to do anything other than what we should be doing. So we're just asking for extra time to be able to do that.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. JT?
No, Mr. Jackson.
Oh, Mr. Jackson, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. I have a question for the applicant.
Okay.
Ma'am, do you all physically reside at this property, or is this a property that you own that you don't live at?
No, we have family members that have lived there. We haven't lived there. Well, I have. My husband has not. But I lived there from 77 on until after I got married. So there has always been family in the home, and there's been ready to be more family there soon.
So at the present time, no one resides at the residence. Is that correct?
Well, the family, our family member that was there, they haven't removed all of their things yet, so I can't say that it's empty. No, sir, I can't say that because they're still going in and out, getting some of their property. But
I'm sorry, ma'am. Let me rephrase.
Okay.
Let me rephrase that question, if I may.
Okay.
Is someone
All right.
sleeping at that house on a nightly basis?
No.
Thank you.
There was a homeless man sleeping on the porch prior to getting the fence.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
This is Josh Whitehead. I did want to ask Ms. Jones one question. I'm on the Register's website, which is not always updated on with regard to ownership. But Ms. Jones, the property that was asked about earlier, the commercial property to the west of the subject property along Bellevue, I think it looks like it was a auto repair shop of some sort at one point.
Yes, sir.
the ownership on the register site shows it owned by a different individual, but I think there was testimony earlier that you or your husband may have erected the fence on that lot. Can you clear that up a little?
No, sir, we did not put that fence up. We don't know who owns the adjacent building, and we don't even know when they put their fence up.
Okay.
We weren't there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, do you know about when that fence was put up? I mean, I would think as a property owner, you would have known there was, I mean, it looks like it wasn't there the Google Street View doesn't show it, so it was put up recently. Do you know about when that other fence was put up?
No, sir. No, sir, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. All right. So I guess y'all, I mean, I know you said your family members, so y'all really don't go by, you don't go by there very often. It's just you're the representative of the family.
I go by daily. I go by daily.
And you didn't notice a 7-foot fence being placed next to your property?
No, because one day I went by, they were cutting down trees. Another day I went by, they were painting the building. Another day I went by, they were up on the roof. And another day I went by, they were the fence was up. So I just can't tell you when it was. I'm just sorry.
Well, yeah, I'm not looking for a specific date. I'm looking, it was last spring or it was 4 years ago type thing. I know you wouldn't necessarily know that it would when it showed up on January 22nd of 2019. I wasn't looking for that sort of specificity.
I think it was put up prior to our fence being put up, but I can't say for sure.
Sure. Okay.
And
that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Before I wasn't quite getting it. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I got you. Are there any other questions?
No,
this
sir,
is
not
Vice
from me.
Chair. Quick
Thank
question. On the environmental court matter, were you ever served on that matter, Ms. Jones?
I don't really understand the question when you say served.
Were you ever served notice about the court hearing in environmental court?
Oh, yes, I've been to the court hearings. Yes, ma'am, I've been to the court hearings. I'm sorry. I have been to the court hearings, and I can give you those dates.
Okay. So, and that case is still open, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, it's open until you guys make a decision. It's what I was told by the judge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one more. So we're looking for 2 years. Is there a possibility it could get done faster than that? Is there a way to get this done in a year as opposed to 2 years? And I know I'm spending your money to ask that question, but I gotta ask it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I understand. But that's the way we worked out our budget because of other bills that we have. So that was the way that we could work it in. We were thinking when we pay off this, we can save that. And then when we pay off this, we can save that. Because we want to be in total compliance. We don't want to ever have to go through this again.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Jones. At this point, unless there's more discussion, would someone want to make a motion to approve BOA 20-103 as conditioned by staff?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want that motion approved before any discussion?
Well, as long as you don't think we need to talk to the applicant or opposition, then we would go ahead and go forward with the motion, and then we would discuss.
Okay. I don't believe I have any additional questions right now of the applicant or the opposition, but I would.
Okay.
I do have some comments and so forth.
Oh, absolutely. Would you care to make that motion?
Yes, I will make the motion that we approve.
All right. Ms. Baker has moved. Is there a second?
Vice Chair, second.
Okay, we got dueling seconds, so we'll take that as duly seconded. Ms. Baker, since you're already talking, I'd love to hear your comments.
Okay. I am actually pretty familiar with this location because I think most of you know I work with Neighborhood Preservation Incorporated regularly, and we're working right now with Klondike neighborhood, which is kind of like a sister neighborhood to Speedway Terrace, and it's right on the north side of Jackson from Speedway Terrace. And you know, there's no question that this is a difficult environment for a home right now. But the UDC says clearly that a chain link fence is not permitted in any district other than the industrial districts. And, you know, if you look at our findings of fact, one of them is that the variance should not be granted because the applicant would save money. I mean, it shouldn't be based on a financial consideration. And so, to me, just waiving enforcement of the zoning regulations for 2 years, it's just not fair to these citizens in Speedway Terrace. I mean, they have worked really hard to lift their neighborhood up, and like I drive through there all the time, and it's working. I see homes being renovated, even new homes being built in the neighborhood as a result of these neighbors standing up for their neighborhoods. And the same is true that Klondike on the other side is improving. And I'm so happy about that. So I'm interested in hearing from the other board members on this. And, you know, if there is an inclination to approve this, you know, with some kind of time limit or however you want to do it, I have some conditions that I would like to suggest at that time, but I'll wait and hear what other board members say before I offer any of them up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Are there other?
This is Joy Doss. I have a couple of questions and comments here. The first one is a question. One, we're not debating the setback. We're just saying yes or no to the fence, right? The setback would be a whole different issue because I don't see that.
I think that the metal fence that is the 2 year from now, that would be okay in that location. This one isn't. So the setback is solved by the new fence, is my understanding. Is that correct, Mr. Whitehead or Mr. Bacchus?
That's
well,
how I understood. But okay.
Let me give you a simple answer and then maybe a more difficult answer. The simple answer is what y'all would be acting on is whatever variances are required for the existing fence, y'all would be approving for at least the 2 year time frame. The more complicated answer is, I think perhaps this, and Mr. Bacchus can correct me on this, the setback discussion may be related to the design guidelines of the Speedway Terrace Historic District, which they would also have to adhere to, and that this body would not have jurisdiction over. So that may be where the setback comes from.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Okay, and so, but we don't have to make a decision. We're saying yes or no to the fence. I gotcha. So the other part of that is a comment. You know, part of what we do as a body is decide when and where to extend grace and who to extend grace to. And I think, you know, this is a great example of, you know, when we can extend grace. The opposition's comments noted, with opposition's comments noted, you know, when we can extend grace to someone. This Speedway Terrace is newish. You know, this is as a person who knows both North and South Memphis, chain link fence are nothing new. We have on one side of our house is a chain link fence. I want to get rid of it, but now there's tree roots stuff, and it's a whole different problem. So, and don't come for me either, y'all. I said maybe I should have said off the record, but anyway, we have these all over these neighborhoods. That's not new. So for me, I think extending some grace is warranted because for most people, this is not. I mean, maybe they did act, and Ms. Jones said they did have a permit, but maybe they acted in a way that they thought was appropriate in terms of the fencing and stuff like that. Maybe they weren't familiar with the guidelines or whatever. But I do think 2 years is fair, and I would be more inclined to say a year. But with her budgeting notwithstanding, I understand that too. So that is my 2 cents on the matter, and people caring about these neighborhoods is also new. So, and whether there's a chain link fence there or not is also new. So I think grace is warranted.
Okay.
This is Vice Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mrs. Savage Towns.
I'm in agreement with Joy on that. I also think and would offer to my fellow board members that we maybe add in a sunset clause to allow them to come back if that's plausible to ensure that they have the wherewithal to get the correct fence to in place. I think they are doing their part in due diligence in trying to maintain and beautify the neighborhood. And they're making effort. I'm not sure the reasoning, and I don't know if they were just trying to keep up with the adjacent property and just kind of match that, even though they were not in compliance. What the reasoning was, but at the same time, I do feel like we have a 2-year period for them to make the wrong right. And so I just would offer that we may be adding a sunset clause, whether it be a year, 2 years, that they must have that done and come back and show that. And if it's not done, okay, then they're back to square one. I have to, abide by the rules. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
And I'd also like to add to that as well. This is Ms. Commissioner Duff. I would like to figure out how we can get some resolution on the case in environmental court. I don't know how we can, incorporate that into this. But, that does need to be resolved, however it shakes out in environmental court. I don't know if this decision affects that. But, and I also want to say, we have to, Ms. Jones's family has been there since the 70s. I think, that shows some commitment to the neighborhood. And we have to, respect our neighbors that have been there for some time as well. So, and maybe respect is not the right word, but for lack of better words, respect the neighbors that have been there. Maybe it takes a little longer to get stuff done, but, we have to respect everybody else's process.
Okay, I got a couple comments on that and want Josh to correct my understanding if I'm wrong. I believe that if we approve this, there won't need to be an environmental case related to the fence because now it's a conforming issue. So I think this would make environmental court go away as it relates to the fence. And then number 2, having the 2 years for them to do that already acts like a sunset clause. So if they don't have it done in 2 years, they would have to come back. Would you agree, Josh?
That's correct. But with your first statement, this body is only alleviating, it acts as one half of the quote-unquote fix to the environmental court case. The other one half occurs tomorrow with the Memphis Landmarks Commission. They must approve this as a 2-year fence as well. So if Ms. Jones gets one but not the other, she still has an environmental court case. She needs to win both cases.
So we can basically approve and pass the buck to Landmarks since we got passed the buck from environmental court, correct?
Well, that's one way to look at it.
No, thank you for the explanation and remind us about the historical, the landmark stuff tomorrow. Did y'all have any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is JT.
Hey, yeah, JT.
This is actually a question for staff. Could you talk to me just a little bit on what's involved in pulling a permit for a fence?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll give a way long response, longer probably than necessary, but I think it helps. It helps me understand when I understand the history. We did not have a requirement to obtain a building permit for a fence until very recently. I'm going to say maybe 2 years ago.
Right.
But that was okay for a long time because we didn't really have a whole lot of regulations, at least outside of the landmarks districts, pertaining to fences. You could put a fence anywhere, and any kind of fence, which goes back to Ms. Doss's point that these things are everywhere. And so what we're kind of doing, kind of like with the sign regulations, we're trying to dig ourselves out of a regulatory regime where there was unfettered non-regulation of a particular subject matter. So in 2010, when the UDC came online, it really started addressing fencing for the first time, I think for the first time in zoning history. The problem with that was I remember I went to the county commission and I said, because this is a joint code, right? And with the joint code comes a joint fee resolution. And I went to the county commission shortly after the code was adopted because we found if you don't have a permit for a particular issue, it's really hard to regulate, right? It's always retroactive regulation. So I remember I went to the county commission, and I won't name names, but he was an interim appointment, and when I requested a permit for fencing, it didn't pass. He made some kind of reference to, does that mean a farmer who wants to put up a fence to keep his livestock in? And so I didn't get my fee permit until maybe 7 years later, again, 2 years ago. And so now, like I said, for the past 2 years, there is a permit requirement. The problem with the brand new permit requirement is a lot of folk don't know about it. And I would venture to say a lot of people don't obtain permits for fences, even though they ought to. But we have testimony that a permit was obtained. The process is you go to Construction Code Enforcement, or now you go on our Development 901 website, and I think it's based upon material. If there's a footing, if there's a footing required, you actually do need a more robust application because there's going to be more inspection done. But again, there is a permitting process, and it's just like any other kind of building permit. You go to Construction Code Enforcement. Sorry for the long answer.
That's actually really good. And so the question would be now that if the applicant does pull a permit and goes through, would that prevent it from what we're talking about today?
Was that I'm sorry, Mr. Penzis, you earlier identified one of the phones on this line that's giving us feedback. Can you address that phone? And Mr. Malazri, I think that was a question for me.
Yes, and it was just like, so if the applicant did pull a permit to build a fence, was there something in the permit process that would have potentially prevented how we got here today for this particular situation?
Well, I mean, Mr. Chairman, can you go around the other board members? And what I'll do for you, Mr. Malazri, is I'll try to find whether that permit was obtained.
Okay.
Okay.
That's perfect. Are there any other comments at this time?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Mary Baker. I have some conditions that I would like to put forward. Just,
Okay.
hopefully, maybe some of the board members may agree that it would make the situation better. So here's number one. Remove the current fence in front and move it back to a location that is 25 feet from the right-of-way of Snowden. Now, I'm
Okay.
understanding that it's set back 50 feet, and so if you move it back to 25 feet, they would still have what would be a standard front yard of 25 feet. Develop a landscape plan for the 25-foot strip that is between the right-of-way and the relocated fence. That's number two.
Okay.
Number three, present this landscape plan for approval by the Board of Adjustment at the March. Number four, install the landscaping no later than the end of April 2021. And then number five, gives them their 2 years, remove and replace fencing in accordance with the Unified Development Code no later than February 1, 2023. And so, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I submit that, what these conditions would do is give the applicant that 2 years that they need, but at the same time, it would take away the industrial appearance of the chain link fence right next to the back of the sidewalk. That is the thing, that we're trying to not have in this city. And so those will be the conditions that I will submit, and I hope can get some support for. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before you hand the floor to the board, Ms. Baker, did you make that in the form of a motion?
I do. I make a motion
Okay.
that we attach these 5 conditions to the motion for approval.
And now, Mr. Chairman, we need a second for
Is there a
discussion purposes.
second? Once we get the second, we can then discuss those conditions. So is there a second?
Right.
John Jackson, second.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, is there discussion on these 5 new conditions?
So this is Joy Dawes. So am I understand that you would like them to have the fence moved, then turn around and replace it also?
Well,
Is that
can I answer that?
suggestion?
Is it okay if I answer that?
Yeah.
I'm just saying just the front part of it. Just move the front part of it back 25 feet, not the whole fence around the property, but just that part that right now is right up against the back of the sidewalk, and of course, the sides that come up to that, but not take away the whole fence, but just move it back so it's not, just right up on the back of the sidewalk. It could go a long way to making this 2 years more acceptable to the citizens who are there and who are trying to make things better.
Any other discussion on these?
Yes. Yes, this is
Okay, go ahead.
Portia Scola.
Portia?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
The other question is also them, I guess, I don't know if it's money involved, but time and money possibly to present a landscape or a planter schedule for in front of the fence, part of the fence that's moved. And part of the whole reason for the application was for the grace period to have the money to come into compliance, of course, pending the historical or land use historical board decision.
with paying to move the fence and then paying and time and money to present the landscaping plan, I'm thinking we're putting the applicant back in the same situation of not having the finances to come into compliance, which is, I guess, the whole point is the compliance portion. And that's
I
just
agree
my
100%.
thought.
Joy Dunn. I'm agreeing with Ms. Gerlach 100% because that was my thinking. That's why I asked about that. And I don't know that a landscape plan is necessary for a fence per se. I mean, just for this, because it's kind of straightforward to me. I mean, if you all disagree, I'm certainly not the expert here, so if you all disagree, I mean, feel free to. But I don't know if that's and again, you know, it is time and money. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, the meter's running. Once you get through doing all of that, you know, puts them right back in a pinch. So I do agree 100% with Ms. Gerlach.
Mr. Chairman, we had to mute Mr. Jackson because we determined it was his phone that was the source of the issue. So I think he would like the floor next. Just FYI.
Okay, yeah. Can you unmute Mr. Jackson?
Thank you.
Yes, he's on.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My thoughts on the whole thing of this, you know, 2 years is, to me, an unreasonable time. I would think a year, 14 months max. I would not feel, if the issue, which the issue has been stated to us is money, you got a year, 14 months to remove the fence and put up the proper fence, or remove the fence you have there and have no fence. The regulations are what they are. That's it. I mean, it's not a whole lot to talk about on it from my point of view. The fence is there. There's no need to spend any money moving it again and then landscaping it. And then 2 years later, the money you spend doing that could be saved for the year to take down the chain link fence and put up a new fence, or just take down the chain link fence at the end of the year. That's it. That would be my vote.
I would support, this is Vice Chair. I would support that, Mr. Jackson, of a 14-month time frame, which to give them time to just, like you said, either take down the fence or put the appropriate fence up. I'm in support of a 14-month time frame.
Okay. I have a question for staff real quick. As far as the replacement of the fence, if they go to the metal tube style fencing, is that for the entire yard or just the frontage?
Mr. Chairman, Brian Bacchus.
Yes, sir.
My understanding from Ms. Jones is that she would like to take the existing black fence and replace the fence in the side and rear yard that it currently exists at the house. There's a 4-foot fence. If you see, look at the photo. There's a 4-foot fence that surrounds the backyard only on lot 1189.
Okay.
The 1191 lot adjacent to that is a vacant lot. It's enclosed in the black fence 6 feet in height. That's my understanding, and that's my understanding of what the photos show me. We're talking about 2 lots here. Keep in mind, we're talking about 2 lots in a commercial district, which the use is permitted. Single family is permitted in CMU 3. However, the existing fence is 6 feet in height. It doesn't meet the zoning code, nor does it meet the landmarks, but the landmarks does allow fencing in the front yard. However, it has to be visually opaque, and it cannot exceed, it just says strongly discouraged, okay? I don't want to get into landmark stuff here, but if your question was, if you could repeat your question, I lost my train of thought.
I may have too. So the question was, as far as the fencing material, is it the front that's by the street that's important, or would that need to be replaced with the metal tubing, which is, granted, more expensive all the way around?
the metal tubing fence could go in the front yard and it could replace the chain link fence.
Could
Exactly
we
where it
only
is.
replace the front yard and be okay with the chain link on the sides? So what
You would
doesn't
have
touch
to, you would have to at least make the fence go beyond, behind the front porch.
the front porch? Okay, so it'd be in the
On
front
the
yard
side,
would need to be the metal tubing, the backyard, we can go back to chain link. Okay, that's helpful to know.
Yeah, it needs to go behind the front porch, approximately 6 feet behind the front porch. And that's, I don't know, she has a choice here to do either or. She could put it on both lots, or she could just put it on the single family lot.
Gotcha, okay.
It's her family home, and it's a family home. My understanding, it's her family home. And the house is currently single family, and they're trying to keep it in its current condition, and also to repair and maintenance, for some general repair and maintenance, also to keep the house up. It's her mother's home, and she's trying to keep the house in the family in order to maintain it, to keep it in its current state. And I think that's a direction in the right. I think that goes in the right direction of preservation. So we're trying to give her an opportunity to try to maintain the house in its current state, and also to enhance the property. I'm not advocating for anything here. I just want to give you an opportunity to understand our review of this project, and that to try to meet people halfway.
Yeah, and I appreciate you kind of framing it for us. That really helps.
And it's not a monetary issue. I think it's more of a practical difficulty issue here, because the location of the property being in the commercial district, and it's open to the elements. So she's trying to maintain the house where she can keep people out of it until, well, even, be honest with you, I wouldn't live there if I didn't have a fence in my front yard. But that's just my personal opinion. As stated earlier, now, keep in mind, we're not advocates of these applications. We just try to meet people halfway, to try to help them understand the process, to get them in a position where they can maintain their property, and more so, especially in a historic district. So this house was built in 1902. So we want to have it preserved. She wants to preserve it, and that's where we are.
Gotcha.
And thank you for that, Mr. Bacchus, because that is what I was trying to say in terms of just, helping people that have been there for many years to maintain and stay in their homes, or keep their homes in the family, and not do anything, not be a part of, not pushing them out might be too dramatic, but, not be a part, not undercut what they're trying to do already. Maybe that's better.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I support Mr. Jackson's motion. I don't know if he made it in the form of a motion, but I support maximum 14 months. I would prefer 12 months, but I would support 14 if that would be acceptable to the other board members.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do a voice vote real quick on your motion? And what I would think we may be doing is voting that down, and then we'll make a new motion incorporating what Mr. Jackson was talking about. And that'll get us back to where we need to be, I think. So, does anybody have any discussion on that proposal? Hearing none, all those, and so just so everyone understands, if you vote aye, then Ms. Baker's original motion or additional motion would apply here. So if you're like voting more in favor of what Mr. Jackson saying, we need to vote no on this just to make sure we're voting the correct way. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got one aye, but all those in favor of not using Ms. Baker's motion signify by saying no. No.
No.
No.
Okay, the noes have it. So I think what we need to do is maybe have a motion that we can then discuss that would allow it to stay like it is right now, but put a 14-month as opposed to 2-year time limit on the fence changing its form, to the metal tube fencing. Would someone like to, can someone make that motion?
So moved.
How do you
Jackson.
come up with what? Okay.
Okay, so it's been moved. Is there a second?
Vice Chair, second.
Second. Oh.
Okay, and now let's discuss that motion. So what we're discussing now is the 14-month amendment for the length of time.
So how do we come up with 14 months? That was my question.
That was based on how long Mr. Jackson thought it should take to get this done, as opposed to 2 years.
No, that's what I heard Mr. Jackson, but I was just wondering where the 14 months came from. Is that just kind of a standard amount of time? Because I was thinking kind of in a middle ground, 2 years is a little bit of a long time, but maybe I was thinking the middle, the compromise is 18 months, but even 15 months. But what did we come up with? Is 14 just kind of standard? I don't know, so I'm asking.
Let me, if I may.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, if I may explain how I came up with the 14 months.
Yes,
basically, we're at February 1 now. So I said, okay, we're February 1, and it's still wintertime, rainy season, 2 more months, March, April. By April 1, you should have had enough time in between the rainy season we're in to be able to get a fence in the ground. So that's how I came up with the 14 months. 1 year and then added 2 months to get us out the rainy season.
Oh, I got you. I get that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, maybe 15, because it rains all the way through May. It's kind of, maybe 15 months. Because it'll be soggy till May, really. What do you think about that, John?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Say that again, please.
I said it's soggy till probably May, so maybe 15 months. What do you think?
I mean, give or take a month, doesn't matter to me. I just think that, 14, 15 months is more than enough time to, get that situation squared away.
Okay. I'm tracking that. That makes sense to me. So I would be in favor of 15 months given the rain situation and the unpredictability of Memphis weather.
Sure.
Till May.
Is there any objection to changing the motion to be 15 months? Hearing none.
No objection.
Okay, hearing none, then it would be 15 months as opposed to 2 years for the fence to be allowed to do that. Is there any further discussion?
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
From a parliamentary standpoint, you can also, at the end of this discussion, just ask if there's any objection to this motion being made part of the main motion, and if there are none, we don't have to take a separate vote. That's number one. And number two, while I have this chance and before we get to the vote, I told Mr. Malazri I would do some homework on whether there was a permit pulled. What happened here is sometimes confusing for people. Ms. Jones applied for a permit. That verb is key here. That verb is not obtained. She applied for a permit. The note here says payment due. So a permit was never issued, but it was applied for.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then I'm going to ask if there's any objection to making the motion we have on here for 15 months a part of the original motion, which would change number one to where the last bid would say permitted for a period of 15 months to that number one condition. I've heard no objections.
John Jackson, so moved.
Okay, very good. With that, I assume y'all are ready to vote. Mr. Whitehead, could you give us a roll call vote on this one?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gerlach.
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Downs.
Yes, I found that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Mr. Malazri,
Yes.
Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Doss,
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook,
Yes.
Ms. Baker,
Yes.
and Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That's 8 ayes.
All right, with that, we've been approved as conditioned, and I think you have, Ms. Jones, you have a hearing tomorrow, so best of luck with that, and hopefully you can get everything moving in the right direction there. Mr. Secretary, will you call our next case?
Next and final. Agenda item number 7 is docket BOA 2131, located at 2166 LZ. Applicant Bird's Nest LLC, Use District R6 within the historic overlay, within a historic overlay, and the request is a variance from subsection 44B to allow 2 curb cuts.
Okay, looks like we have Mr. Bacchus, you're up again. Do you want to give us I think we've read the staff report. Do you want to I know we want to talk about conditions. Would you like to kind of briefly tell us what's going on and go over what the issues may be?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, this is a request for a single-family home to allow 2 curb cuts in the front yard on a lot that's 50 feet in width. The applicant has indicated to me that they're not in agreement with condition number 2, which states the gravel drive shall be removed and replaced with sod, and the existing curb cut shall be closed with curb gut and sidewalk. Now, I think he wants to delete the last portion of that condition that states, and the existing curb cut shall be closed with curb gut and sidewalk. And I'll let Mr. James explain the reasons why.
Am I supposed to start talking now?
Yeah, Mr. James, why don't you say your name and address for the record?
My name is Aaron James. My name is Aaron James. My address is 2029 Felix, 38104.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the true self you got?
Well, I don't believe in God, but I'll tell the truth.
Well, I guess that's all we're going to get today then. Yeah, go ahead and talk to us.
Well, so I'm going to save y'all a lot of time and trouble because I've already been sitting here for an hour and 15 minutes. But so we're not going to push the issue. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we feel like we're trying to do anything detrimental to the neighborhood. If we decide to move the driveway, we'll just comply with what y'all are saying. We'll just move the driveway. The only thing, which only have the one driveway. The only thing that I was talking to Mr. Bacchus about yesterday, and he seemed to be supportive, at least in concept, is that in the existing curb cut now, there's an old abandoned gas meter. And if y'all have ever dealt with trying to, move or cap or otherwise involve MLG&W in any way, that's going to significantly increase the cost of removing the old curb cut. So that was the only reasoning behind that. So we're beyond the whole idea of hoping to keep both driveways. So we're that's not the issue. But if we do decide to move the driveway to the east side of the house to facilitate handicap accessibility, we'd really love to avoid having to remove the existing curb cut. We will, however, obviously remove the old gravel drive and reseed or sod that space.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Brian Bacchus. just point of information, I just want to give the applicant the information. He mentioned if we decide to do the private drive and the handicap accessibility, I just want to give him the heads up that you have to execute this. If this variance is approved, it has to be executed within 2 years.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we're good.
Okay, all right, I'm just thinking right now, because I understand what you're saying, like, we don't mind not having a driveway, we just don't know what its cost is gonna be to change the concrete enough because of that meter, is what your question is, really.
I know what it's going to cost. It'd be about a $10,000 number. Yeah. That's assuming we can get MLG&W to come out and do it. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
that's their cost to do it. Okay. Are there any other thoughts from the board? Okay, hearing none, and there's no opposition on this, correct, Mr. Secretary?
That's correct.
Okay. With that, I assume that we're ready to discuss. Would someone on the board like to give a motion to approve BOA 20-131 as conditioned by staff?
Vice Chair, so moved.
Okay, I've been moved. Is there a second? Okay, being moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I assume y'all are ready to vote. Mr. Whitehead, will you give us a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Mr. Melasry?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met. It will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
8 ayes.
All right, you've been approved. Thank you very much. Mr. Whitehead, is there any further business today?
No, sir.
All right, with that, we are adjourned until February. Thank you.
Thanks.
Y'all have a good
Thank
week.
you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.